Run. That was the only word screaming through Elysia's mind as the heavy leather luggage tore into her raw, unhealed palms. The winding path leading up to the Gothic stone fortress of Tenebris Keep wasn't paved with welcoming gold. It was a choking, suffocating labyrinth of razor-sharp black briars. The thorns twisted like jagged iron teeth, clawing at her clothes and catching on the hem of her faded, cheap linen dress. Behind her, the high-pitched, mocking laughter of her half-sisters cut through the freezing mountain fog like a dull blade. "Move faster, wolfless freak!" Vanya sneered, her voice dripping with venomous amusement, as she deliberately shoved a massive, iron-bound trunk directly against Elysia's spine. The sudden impact sent Elysia crashing forward onto the gravel. The King's Court doesn't wait for charity cases or low-born mistakes. If you bleed out in the gardens before we even reach the front gates, we'll just tell Father you ran away out of cowardice. Honestly, it would save our family the embarrassment of presenting a broken tool to the High Council. Elysia stumbled, her knees hitting the sharp stones. The primordial black briars instantly reacted to the scent of her blood, wrapping around her ankles and drawing bright crimson lines across her skin. She had no inner wolf. In a world ruled by apex predators, where physical power and spiritual rank dictated your survival, Elysia was a ghost, a social zero. She lacked the rapid cellular healing of her highborn peers. Every cut burned with agonizing, human precision. But as Daria stepped up, raising a heavy leather boot to kick her further into the dirt, Elysia's fingers closed tightly around a heavy iron coin hidden inside her palm. The metal was cold, worn smooth from years of secret safekeeping. Her grandmother's dying words echoed clearly through her mind, overriding the insults raining down on her. "A crown is nothing but a mask, forged in gold, Elysia. It shows only what a tyrant wants the world to see. But the hands are where the soul's true currency is told. Find the honest ones, my girl. Never let them see you beg." Elysia wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to die in the dirt for their amusement. With a low, defiant breath, she stood up. Her jaw was set so tightly it ached, and she stared directly into Vanya's cruel, glittering eyes. "If I bleed out in these gardens, Vanya," Elysia said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, steady whisper, "who is going to carry your 3 trunks of worthless silk gowns up the mountain? Do it yourself, or keep your mouth shut." Vanya gasped, her aristocratic face contorting into pure, unbridled rage. Her claws extended instantly, glowing with a predatory alphaline light that hissed against the damp mountain air. "You dare speak to me like that? You are a parasite in our household, a defect with no wolf spirit to protect you. I could rip your throat out right here, and Father wouldn't even demand a fine." Vanya raised her hand, her sharp claws aimed directly at Elysia's exposed neck. Elysia braced herself, refusing to look away, tightening her grip on the iron coin. Suddenly, the dense shadows behind the briar bushes detached themselves from the trees. A massive, towering figure stepped silently into the pale moonlight. He possessed broad, immovable shoulders, a chest like solid iron, and a face completely obscured by a heavy, dark worker's cloak. It was the mute groundskeeper, Kalen. He didn't speak a single word. He didn't need to. He simply stepped into the space between them, his slate-grey eyes locking onto Vanya. Those eyes didn't look like the eyes of a peasant. They flashed with a cold, sub-zero warning, so profound, it made the high-born she-wolf's instincts violently scream. Vanya instantly froze, her claws retracting as a cold sweat broke across her neck. Without a sound, Kalen turned his back on them, dismissing their high-born status entirely. His huge, heavily scarred hands reached down and effortlessly picked up the crushing luggage, lifting 3 massive trunks as if they were filled with nothing but feathers. Elysia didn't run away to join her sisters like a frightened rabbit. Instead, she stayed back, her eyes tracking his movements. She noticed his hands. They were bleeding from fresh, deep briar cuts obtained while clearing the path. Without a word, Elysia tore a long, thick strip of clean silk from her own hem. She stepped closer to the silent giant, ignoring the frantic whispers of her sisters telling her to get away from the servant. She gently took his large, calloused hand and began to carefully wrap his bleeding knuckles. The very millisecond her bare skin brushed against his, a violent, invisible shockwave of pure energy rippled through the clearing. The air hummed with a terrifying resonance, and the primordial black briars surrounding them instantly withered into grey ash, pulling back into the earth, as if terrified of her touch. Kalen stiffened completely. His massive frame went rigid as his slate-grey eyes widened in absolute, paralyzing shock. He stared down at her small, fragile hands wrapped around his chest heaving as if he had just been hit by lightning. We are just getting started on this deadly game of survival. If you want to see how a forgotten outcast completely terrifies a predatory empire, hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like button, and turn on all notifications. Drop a comment below right now if you think this silent groundskeeper is hiding something lethal under that cloak. Inside the grand hall of Tenebris Keep, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. The air smelled of expensive roasting meats, heavy perfumes, and the sharp, distinct underlying scent of alpha pheromones meant to intimidate. The grand double doors swung open, and the gathered nobility erupted into practiced, synchronized cheers. There, sitting high upon the jagged obsidian throne, was the Alpha King. He was a terrifying, imposing figure, his face entirely concealed by an expressionless royal mask crafted from solid, polished black glass. His presence radiated an oppressive, suffocating dark aura that seemed to physically weigh down on the shoulders of everyone in the room. Vanya and Daria immediately pushed their way past the other candidates, forcing themselves to the very front of the crimson carpet. They draped themselves in their finest family jewels, gesturing wildly to the servants behind them, who carried chests of gold and ancestral bloodline scrolls. "My king," Vanya purred, her voice dripping with calculated sweetness as she executed a flawless, low bow. "The Ashvin pack offers our finest frontline warriors, our vast eastern silver mines, and our deepest, unshakable loyalty to your sacred crown. We have brought our purest bloodlines to ensure your legacy remains untainted." From behind the smooth black glass of the mask, a deep, booming voice vibrated through the stone floor, echoing off the high arches of the ceiling. "Your loyalty and your wealth are noted, Lady Vanya. We shall see if your true character matches the glittering gold you display so proudly during this week of consideration. Wealth can buy a crown, but it cannot buy stability." Elysia stood at the very back of the hall, melting into the deep shadows near the entrance. She wasn't looking at the magnificent throne, nor was she looking at the glittering jewels of the court. Her eyes were fixed on the royal guard standing directly to the left of the dais. And then, her gaze shifted toward the massive roaring hearth at the side of the room. Tending the roaring fire, completely ignored by the laughing, arrogant nobility, was Kalen. He stood there with an iron poker in his hand, watching the room with the precise, lethal gaze of an apex predator tracking unsuspecting prey in an open field. Elysia narrowed her eyes, her sharp mind analyzing every single movement in the room. She noticed the way the king on the throne subtly shifted his posture, checking the subtle hand signals of the Lord Commander standing next to him before he spoke a single sentence. It was too rehearsed. It was a beautiful, highly orchestrated lie. The next morning, unable to stand the suffocating falseness of the guest quarters, Elysia sneaked into the massive, three-story forbidden archives of the castle. She was desperate to find an ancient map or an escape route that would allow her to flee this deadly political trap before the week concluded. As she stretched her arms to pull a heavy, leather-bound historical text from the top shelf, a large, warm hand reached over her shoulder, effortlessly steadying the heavy book before it could fall. She spun around instantly, her breath catching in her throat. It was him, Kalen. He stood incredibly close, his massive frame blocking the light from the stained glass window. "You shouldn't be in here," Elysia whispered, keeping her voice low so it wouldn't echo through the empty library arches. "If the High Council catches a low-born servant wandering through the royal archives, they'll lock you in the dungeons without a trial. Go back to the gardens." Kalen didn't move an inch. Instead, he pulled a small piece of dark charcoal from his pocket and wrote with fluid, elegant strokes on the wide margin of a dusty parchment lying on the table. "Why are you here, Wolfless lady? You do not dance for the king like the others. You hide in the dust." Elysia let out a soft, bitter laugh, her eyes scanning his elegant handwriting. "Because the king on that throne is nothing but a ghost, Kalen. He looks at all of us like we're livestock brought to market, checking our teeth and our dowries. A man who hides his face behind a piece of black glass and lets his council pull his strings like a marionette isn't a real king. He's a coward. My grandmother used to say, 'A crown only shows what a man wants you to see. His hands show what he truly is.'" She reached out instinctively, her fingers gently touching the clean silk cloth she had wrapped around his scarred knuckles the night before. "Your hands actually work. They build, they bleed, they clear the path. His hands just take." "I have no interest in a puppet." Kalen stared down at her, the charcoal freezing in his massive grip. The sheer, unadulterated intensity in his slate-grey eyes was so fierce, so burning, that it made her entire body tremble. He leaned in slightly, his scent of wild cedar and winter frost enveloping her. He wrote again, his letters sharp, dark, and urgent. "What if the king is much closer than you think, Elysia? What if he is watching you right now?" Before Elysia could process the strange, unsettling message, a piercing, agonizing scream shattered the silence of the library, echoing from the adjacent grand dining hall. Elysia's instincts flared. She rushed through the heavy oak doors, her boots clicking against the stone, with Kalen following closely behind, his heavy steps making no sound at all. In the exact center of the grand dining hall, a scene of absolute horror was unfolding. A young, trembling kitchen maid named Nesta was on her knees, surrounded by a mess of shattered porcelain and spilled water. She had tripped over the uneven rugs, spilling a heavy basin of ancestral holy silver water directly onto the polished leather boots of Lord Commander Jarek, the king's fiercely traditional, merciless second-in-command. "Miserable, clumsy rat!" Jarek roared, his face contorted into a mask of pure, aristocratic rage. The silver water was reacting with his skin, causing slight wisps of smoke to rise from his uniform. He drew his massive, silver-edged broadsword from his hip, the metal singing a death note. "You dare defile a high commander of the royal line with unrefined silver? This is a deliberate act of treason. The punishment for insulting the bloodline is death on the spot." Vanya and Daria stepped forward from the crowd of onlookers, arms crossed, cruel smirks plastering their faces. "Execute her!" Vanya demanded loudly, wanting to gain favor with the commander. "Cleanse this beautiful castle of these incompetent, weak links. If she cannot even carry a basin without failing, she deserves to be put down like the stray dog she is." The surrounding royal guards stepped back into a wide circle, clearing the space and allowing Jarek to raise his massive sword high above his head. Nesta wept uncontrollably, covering her face with her small hands, closing her eyes as she waited for the fatal blow to sever her neck. "Stop!" Elysia's voice rang across the vaulted hall like a striking silver bell, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the wolfless outcast sprinted across the polished marble floor and threw herself directly over the small body of the kitchen maid. Jarek's heavy broadsword came down with lethal, crushing force. Elysia didn't close her eyes. She didn't flinch. She reached up with both arms and caught the bare, razor-sharp steel of the blade with her bare palms. The entire room went dead silent. The only sound was the steady, terrifying drip, drip, drip of crimson blood falling from Elysia's open palms, sizzling with strange intensity as it coated the silver blade. But she didn't utter a single cry of pain. She stood tall, staring directly up into the murderous, wide eyes of the powerful commander, her voice dripping with pure, unadulterated venom. "She is a child who tripped over a poorly placed rug, Commander. If a High Commander of the Royal Army needs to slaughter a defenseless, weeping child to prove his strength to this court, then your grand empire is already crumbling from the inside out. Your sword is heavy, Jarek, but your honor is completely hollow." Jarek's eyes flashed a murderous, demonic crimson as his alpha aura flared, threatening to crush everyone in the room. "You wolfless piece of peasant trash! You dare lecture me on honor? You die with her!" Using his immense alpha strength, he pulled the sword back, intending to decapitate both Elysia and the maid with a single, brutal swing. He swung the blade with maximum force, but the strike never connected. A terrifying, primordial roar tore through the grand hall, a sound so loud and full of ancient, dominant power that it shattered every single stained glass window in the room into a million flying shards. The temperature in the hall dropped instantly to freezing, frost spreading across the banquet tables as pure, physical darkness erupted from the back of the room. Kalen moved like a bolt of black lightning. Before Jarek could even blink, the silent groundskeeper intercepted the lethal blow. He caught Jarek's ancestral broadsword with a single bare hand, and with a casual, terrifying flex of his fingers, he shattered the thick steel blade into a cloud of metallic dust. The sheer kinetic force of the block sent Jarek flying backward across the hall, his body crashing violently into the heavy banquet table, shattering the wood into splinters. The entire royal guard drew their weapons in a panic, but their hands were trembling uncontrollably. The suffocating, dark energy radiating from the servant groundskeeper was completely paralyzing. It was an aura that demanded absolute, unconditional submission. If your heart is pounding right now, and you want to see justice served, leave a comment below saying Team Elysia, and smash that like button. We are about to cross the point of no return, and you won't believe the trap that's about to spring. Later that night, under the cover of pitch-black darkness, Elysia sat alone on a stone bench in the wild eastern gardens. She was quietly wheezing from the emotional exhaustion, attempting to use her limited supplies to bandage the deep, jagged cuts across her palms. The heavy, sweet scent of silver lavender hung incredibly thick in the cool night air, glowing faintly in the dark. "You handle a blade incredibly poorly for someone who possesses such a sharp, dangerous tongue, Lady Elysia." Elysia gasped, her entire body flinching as she spun around on the bench. Standing in the pale moonlight was Kalen, but he was no longer wearing his tattered, dirt-stained servant's cloak. He wore a heavy, midnight black tunic made of rare silk, embroidered with the royal crest in shimmering platinum thread, and he was speaking. His voice wasn't weak. It was a low, gravelly, commanding baritone that sent a physical vibration straight through her chest and into her soul. You can speak," Elysia whispered, her hands shaking as she took a defensive step back against the stone fountain. "You've been lying to everyone since the moment we arrived." "I speak only when the words actually matter," he said, stepping out of the tree shadows and directly into the clear moonlight, revealing his striking, unmasked face. "I am Valerius Thorne, the Alpha King of this realm." Elysia's breath hitched in her throat, her mind racing to connect the pieces. The man sitting on the obsidian throne, the mask. "A decoy," Valerius said, closing the distance between them, until he stood so close she could feel the intense heat radiating from his large frame. "Lord Commander Jarek's puppet, put there to satisfy the public while I walked among the candidates. I needed to see who these high-born women truly were when they thought no one of consequence was watching them. I looked for a partner, but I found nothing but greed, cruelty, and rehearsed hypocrisy." He reached down, his large, warm, scarred palms gently taking her injured hands into his own, his touch instantly taking away the burning sting of the silver cuts. "Except for you, you gave a piece of your clothing to a bleeding servant. You risked your life and faced a commander's blade to protect a kitchen maid. You hold a worthless piece of iron in your hand, and yet you possess the only true honesty in this entire kingdom. Valerius, you don't understand what you're saying, Elysia said, her voice trembling as his touch sent a strange, intoxicating warmth flooding through her veins, calming her racing heart. I am Wolfless. I have no political backing, no ancient rank, no ancestral power to offer your line. The High Council will never allow this union. They will tear your kingdom apart before they let a defect sit on the throne. They don't understand what you truly are, Elysia, Valerius murmured, his slate-grey eyes suddenly shifting into a glowing molten gold that pierced through the darkness. My royal bloodline carries a terrifying ancient curse, a primordial cosmic shadow that constantly claws at my mind, tearing my soul apart from the inside out. A normal she-wolf spirit cannot handle the strain. Their inner wolves clash violently with the darkness, destroying them. But you, the moment you touched my hand in the briar patch, my cosmic shadow went completely dead silent for the first time in my life. You aren't defective, Elysia. You belong to the legendary bloodline of the Anchors. Your soul is a pristine, bottomless sanctuary, capable of neutralizing the darkness. You are the only entity alive who can hold me together without breaking. Suddenly, the surrounding lavender bushes exploded into splinters. A dozen elite High Council assassins, clad in dark armor and carrying weapons dripping with glowing, neon-green mandrake poison, completely surrounded the garden perimeter. Emerging from the rear of the ambush was Lord Commander Jarek, a twisted, sinister grin splitting his scarred face. What a beautiful, touching scene, foolish king, Jarek hissed, his voice full of absolute triumph. Did you really think your little servant disguise went unnoticed by the council? We knew exactly who she was the moment she crossed the border. We knew she was an anchor. That is precisely why we forced her debt-ridden family to send her to the weak of consideration. We wanted you to find her, Valerius. We wanted you to fall desperately in love and lock the ancient alpha-mate bond into place. Jarek raised his hand, gesturing for the assassins to tighten the circle. Because the very millisecond that mate bond is sealed, we are going to slaughter your precious little anchor right in front of your eyes. The absolute grief of losing her will drive your internal cosmic shadow into a permanent, unhinged, apocalyptic rage. You will become a mindless, godlike weapon of mass destruction, and the High Council will hold your leash, using your wrath to conquer the entire continent. Assassins, kill the girl. Trigger the ultimate weapon. The elite assassins lunged forward simultaneously, their poisoned blades cutting through the air, aimed directly at Elysia's exposed heart. Valerius roared in pure defiance, his immense cosmic shadow erupting from his back like massive, terrifying wings of pure darkness, shielding her body from the initial wave of strikes. He fought with brutal, unhinged ferocity, snapping blades with his bare hands and hurling assassins into the stone walls. But there were too many of them, and they were coordinated. As Valerius turned to parry a strike from Jarek, an assassin bypassed his guard from the blind spot, driving a poisoned dagger deep into Valerius's shoulder. The Alpha King gasped, stumbling forward as the black mandrake poison rapidly flooded his bloodstream, forcing his inner cosmic shadow to violently split from his control. The darkness began to warp and tear at his own flesh, black veins creeping up his neck as he fell to both knees, roaring in agony. "It's over!" Jarek laughed hysterically, stepping past the writhing king and raising his heavy sword over Elysia. "Watch carefully, king. Watch your world burn as she dies." Elysia looked down at the bleeding, agonizing king, who had risked everything to protect her. She looked at her grandmother's iron coin, now completely coated in her own blood. "A crown shows only what a tyrant wants you to see," she whispered fiercely, her fear completely evaporating, replaced by a cold, ancient power waking up in her chest. But the hands show what a true leader is. She didn't try to flee. Instead of backing away, she took a giant step forward, directly into the swirling, violent vortex of destructive shadow energy that was currently ripping Valerius apart. Jarek screamed in triumph, fully expecting her fragile, wolfless body to be instantly vaporized into dust by the ambient energy. Instead, Elysia slammed both of her bleeding palms directly onto Valerius's bare chest. "I accept the burden, Valerius," she cried out into the howling storm, her voice echoing with absolute authority. "Let me carry the weight of your shadow. I am your anchor." The ancient alpha-mate bond snapped into place, with a blinding, deafening celestial explosion that illuminated the entire mountain range. The destructive cosmic shadow didn't harm her. Instead, her unique soul acted as a perfect, bottomless vacuum. She absorbed the raging, toxic darkness into her own chest, instantly purifying the poison, filtering the chaos, and channeling it back into Valerius as a stabilized, divine power. Elysia's eyes snapped open. They were no longer human. They glowed with a brilliant, luminescent, piercing silver light that banished every shadow in the garden. Valerius stood up slowly, his body completely healed, his physical size expanding as his aura transformed into a majestic, terrifying combination of midnight black and radiant celestial silver. He looked down at Elysia, their souls completely intertwined. With a single, casual wave of his hand, a massive shockwave of unified silver-black power blasted outward from his body. The immense kinetic wave instantly disintegrated the assassin's weapons into dust and sent the remaining council members flying through the air, crashing violently into the stone walls. Jarek crawled backward through the dirt in absolute, paralyzing terror, his boots slipping in the mud as he stared up at the wolfless girl who now wielded the purified power of a primordial god. What are you? You have no wolf. You should be dead." Elysia stepped forward, her silver eyes locking onto him like twin stars. "I am the queen of this empire, Jarek, and your judgment has arrived." The very next morning, the grand throne room was packed to its absolute maximum capacity. Every noble, warrior, and lord from the surrounding territories had arrived, whispering frantically about the cataclysmic event that had occurred in the gardens the night before. The heavy iron doors groaned open, and Lord Commander Jarek, along with the surviving members of the corrupt High Council, were dragged inside. They were bound in heavy, magic-suppressing iron chains, their faces pale and defeated as they were forced to their knees before the dais. Vanya and Daria stood tightly packed into the corner of the room, trembling violently, their previous arrogance completely shattered as Elysia walked past them down the long crimson carpet. She wasn't wearing a fragile, cheap linen gown anymore. She wore a magnificent, heavy royal robe, intricately woven from midnight black silk and living silver briar stems that hummed with pure energy. As she reached the base of the throne, Nesta, the young kitchen maid she had saved, stepped forward from the crowd of royal servants. In her hands, she carefully carried a beautiful ceramic vase. It was the exact same vase that had been shattered during the dining hall chaos, but Nesta had spent the entire night meticulously repairing it, filling every single fracture and crack with glowing, liquid silver steel. "For the true queen," Nesta said, her voice clear and proud as she bowed deeply to the floor. "The queen who does not throw away the broken, but mends what is fractured with honor and strength." Elysia gently took the vase from the girl's hands. She turned around and placed it directly in the dead center of the High Council's round table for everyone to see. "Let this vase stand as an eternal reminder to every pack in this territory," Elysia announced, her voice echoing flawlessly through the vast stone arches of the hall, commanding absolute silence. "From this day forward, this empire will no longer rule through fear, superficial perfection, or genetic bloodlines. We will rule through honor, sacrifice, and truth. The ancient discriminatory laws requiring wolf rank to hold power are hereby permanently abolished. True strength is found in actions, not birthrights." Valerius stepped up onto the dais behind her. He didn't sit on the throne. Instead, he drew his massive royal broadsword, but he didn't raise it in a threat. In front of the entire assembly of shocked nobility, the Alpha King dropped to one knee before the Wolfless girl, lowering his head and holding the hilt of his weapon out to her in his massive, scarred hands. "The heavy obsidian crown belongs to the Empire, my absolute love," Valerius whispered, his deep baritone carrying across the silent room with fierce devotion. "But my hands, my inner wolf, and my entire soul will forever belong to you. You are my queen." 1 year later, the Obsidian Spine Pack had completely transformed, becoming the most prosperous, peaceful, and unconquerable empire the world had ever seen. The old divisions of rank had faded into history. In the exact center of the new palace courtyard, a massive white marble fountain washed over a beautifully carved stone monument. It depicted two hands clasped tightly together, holding a simple, worn iron coin. Elysia and Valerius stood together on the high palace balcony, looking out over the sprawling, beautiful city below as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. He wrapped his massive arms around her waist from behind, pressing a soft, warm kiss to the side of her neck as she opened her palm, letting the cool evening breeze wash over her grandmother's iron coin. They were no longer the outcasts of a cruel world. They were the unbreakable anchors of a brand new dawn. What an absolutely legendary journey. Elysia proved to an entire empire that true, godlike strength doesn't come from a dominant wolf spirit or a royal title, but from the unyielding purity and courage of your soul. If you loved this massive twist and want to see more high-stakes, rule-breaking werewolf stories that completely redefine the genre, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button, share this video with your fellow story lovers, and drop a comment below letting me know what your absolute favorite part of the story was. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next cinematic chapter.